Your poor face.
Look at my eye.
Oh my gosh.
I broke my wrist, lost the nail on the finger, and then I'm all black and blue. I said, well, the hill doesn't look that steep. Let me take a down. And then
You rolled down a hill?
Oh,
That's not
no,
true.
it's true.
He has a net worth of nearly $500 million, a supercar garage bigger than a shopping mall, and the power to make all of America laugh every single night. But trust me, if someone offered you Jay Leno's entire fortune in exchange for living his life, you would drop to your knees and beg to decline. Why? Because behind that trademark Hollywood smile lies a psychological death sentence. His life is cursed by a cruelty that will give you chills. His entire family has been wiped out. His physical body has been repeatedly mutilated, and the most devastating final blow is unfolding right now inside his sprawling, luxurious mansion. Strip away the comedy mask. Here is the terrifying dark truth about America's king of late night. The long and painful saga of Jay Leno's life began not on the grand stage of The Tonight Show, but in the quiet, unforgiving classrooms and schoolyards of his youth, where the first deep psychological wounds were inflicted, shaping a man who would forever use comedy as a shield against the world. He was born James Douglas Muir Leno on April 28, 1950, and grew up in a modest working-class home in Andover, Massachusetts. His father, Angelo, worked as an insurance salesman, while his mother, Catherine, a homemaker who had immigrated from Scotland, held very high expectations for her two sons. They were parents from a generation that valued discipline and viewed any form of failure as entirely unacceptable, creating a home environment where pressure was a constant presence. It was within this demanding household that young Jay first confronted his most persistent and private struggle, a severe case of dyslexia. For most children, learning to read and write is a magical process that opens up the entire world. But for Jay, it was a form of daily torture. The letters on the page seemed to dance and rearrange themselves, making the simple act of reading a paragraph an exhausting and frustrating battle. At school, he was quickly labeled as a slow or stupid student by teachers who lacked the patience or understanding to help him. One high school guidance counselor went so far as to advise him to drop out, convinced that he was simply not capable of succeeding academically. His classmates were even less forgiving, openly mocking him whenever he was forced to read aloud, cementing a deep-seated feeling within him that he was fundamentally useless and inadequate. It was his mother, Catherine, who became his staunchest ally, patiently spending countless hours with him after school, helping him with his homework, and instilling in him a piece of advice he would never forget. You will have to work twice as hard as everyone else just to get the same things they have. While meant to be encouraging, this statement also confirmed a harsh reality that defined his early years. From the very beginning of his life's race, he was already at a significant disadvantage. If his dyslexia was an invisible burden, his physical appearance was a visible cross he had to bear every single day. Jay was born with a genetic condition known as mandibular prognathism, which caused his lower jaw to grow disproportionately larger than his upper jaw, resulting in a very prominent chin. Throughout his childhood and teenage years, this distinct facial feature made him an easy and constant target for relentless and cruel teasing from other children. He was given hurtful nicknames and was subjected to endless ridicule, which fostered a profound sense of shame about his own face. The insecurity became so severe that many people, including medical professionals, strongly suggested that he undergo major reconstructive surgery to correct the issue. This was a complex and painful procedure that involved breaking the jawbone, resetting it, and then wiring the mouth shut for a long and difficult recovery period. Despite the promise of a more normal appearance, Leno ultimately refused the surgery. He was afraid that it might alter his voice, which he was already beginning to realize was a crucial tool for his comedic ambitions. More importantly, on a deeper level, he decided to keep the very feature that had caused him so much pain, viewing it as the one thing that made him unique, a physical trademark that, while a source of torment, was undeniably his. Pushed into a corner by his academic struggles and his physical insecurities, the young Jay Leno found he had only one available path for survival. He discovered that he could use humor as a thin but effective shield to protect his fragile self-esteem. He reasoned that if people were going to laugh at him anyway, it would be far better if he could control the reason for their laughter. By making them laugh at his jokes instead of his perceived flaws, he could reclaim a small measure of power and acceptance. A perceptive English teacher noticed his natural wit and encouraged him to write down his jokes and perform them for the class, giving him his first taste of positive reinforcement. His initial success in comedy was not born from a pure, joyful talent, but from a desperate, primal need to be liked and accepted by his peers. Every laugh he earned from an audience was a small validation, a temporary reassurance that he was not the failure he so often felt he was. Comedy became his weapon and his refuge, a survival mechanism that helped him navigate the painful years of rejection. He could not have known then that this same defense mechanism would one day propel him to the highest peaks of fame. But it would also lead him into a new set of tragedies, far greater and more public than anything he had yet experienced. After graduating from college, Jay Leno moved to Los Angeles to pursue his dream of becoming a stand-up comedian. And through sheer hard work and relentless performing, he became a regular guest, and eventually the exclusive guest host for the legendary Johnny Carson on The Tonight Show. However, the journey from a struggling comic to the king of late-night television was not a story of simple triumph. It was a path paved with controversial decisions, broken friendships, and a reputation that would be permanently stained by conflict. In 1992, when Johnny Carson announced his retirement after an iconic 30-year run, the entire entertainment world assumed that his successor would be David Letterman, the host of the show that followed Carson's, and a man who was widely seen as Carson's personal protege and rightful heir. In a shocking turn of events, the network NBC chose Jay Leno instead. This decision ignited one of the most bitter and public feuds in television history, as a deeply betrayed Letterman left NBC for the rival network CBS, where he launched a competing show directly opposite Leno. The industry was instantly divided, with many accusing Leno of using aggressive behind-the-scenes tactics and political maneuvering to steal a job that was not his. He was labeled a traitor and an opportunist, and while he had secured the most coveted desk in television, he paid a steep price in the form of alienation from many of his peers and a permanent blemish on his professional character. Just when it seemed the controversy of 1992 had defined his career, a far more damaging episode unfolded in 2010. Years earlier, in 2004, NBC had promised Conan O'Brien, Letterman's successor, that he would take over The Tonight Show in 5 years to prevent him from leaving for another network. Leno publicly agreed to this plan, and in 2009, Conan became the new host, as promised. In an effort to keep Leno at the network, NBC gave him a new show in an earlier time slot, but it failed dramatically in the ratings and negatively impacted the viewership of Conan's show, which followed. In a disastrous move, the network proposed moving Leno's show back into the late-night slot, which would have pushed The Tonight Show to after midnight for the first time in its history. This was seen as a profound insult to Conan and a betrayal of the network's promise, forcing Conan to leave the network in a storm of public anger and disappointment after only 7 months as host. Jay Leno was reinstated as the host of The Tonight Show, But this time, the public and industry backlash was immense and unforgiving. He was widely condemned as a selfish careerist who had sabotaged a colleague, and he had to walk onto his stage each night and perform his monologue while facing a nationwide chorus of criticism. This period was a living hell, a profound professional tragedy where the prize of fame felt hollow and poisonous. Throughout his career, other incidents added to his controversial reputation, such as his decision to continue working and writing his own material during the 2007 to 2008 Writers Guild strike, an act seen by many as a betrayal of solidarity with his fellow entertainers. These career battles, whether self-inflicted or the result of circumstance, forged the public image of a relentless and ambitious man. But while these public wars were raging, a series of far more devastating and personal tragedies were quietly unfolding in his private life, inflicted not by rivals, but by fate itself. If the struggles in his career were wounds caused by human ambition and conflict, the losses within his family were cruel, unavoidable blows delivered by destiny, striking him repeatedly just as he was reaching the pinnacle of his professional success. In less than a decade, the man who entertained millions of people every night was forced to watch his own small, private world crumble completely. In 1993, only a year after he officially took over The Tonight Show, his mother, Catherine, passed away. She had been his first and most steadfast believer, the woman who had patiently guided him through his struggles with dyslexia and had encouraged his comedic talents when no one else did. For her to pass away just as he had achieved the dream they had both worked toward was a bitter and ironic twist of fate, leaving him with a sense of glory that felt incomplete because he could no longer share it with her. The pain was compounded just 1 year later, in 1994, when his father, Angelo, also passed away. His parents had been married for over 50 years, and the loss of his wife seemed to have taken away his father's will to live. In the short span of 12 months, the two foundational pillars of his life were gone, leaving a void that fame and success could never hope to fill. After the death of his parents, the only immediate family Jay had left was his older brother, Patrick Leno. Patrick, who was 10 years older, was a man Jay deeply admired. He was a Vietnam veteran and a successful lawyer who had graduated from the prestigious Yale Law School. The two brothers were incredibly close, and Patrick became Jay's primary source of emotional support and guidance after their parents were gone. But tragedy was not finished with the Leno family. In 2002, Patrick died of cancer at the age of 62. This loss was the most devastating blow yet for Jay. It was not just the death of a brother and a best friend, it was the end of his entire family line. He was now the last one left. He would later admit that this was the moment he truly understood the meaninglessness of his professional success. The money, the ratings, the applause from millions of strangers all felt empty and hollow when there was no longer any family left to share it with. His world had shrunk to a single person, his wife, Mavis. They had married in 1980, and for over 4 decades, she had been his rock, the one constant presence who stood by him through every professional battle and every personal heartbreak. Their marriage was the last remaining fortress against a world of loss and loneliness, the final and most precious thing he had left. But even that last sanctuary was about to come under siege from a new and final tragedy, one more insidious and cruel than death itself. Before that final sorrow arrived, however, Leno's own body would begin to pay a heavy price for a lifetime of relentless work and a passion for dangerous hobbies. Jay Leno was known not only for his comedy, but also for his intense passion for cars and motorcycles. And he owned a legendary collection of hundreds of rare and powerful vehicles that he often worked on himself. This lifelong hobby, which had brought him so much joy, would become a source of horrific physical torment in his later years, as a series of shocking accidents left his body broken and scarred. The first warning signs about his health had appeared years earlier, in 2009, when he was hospitalized for exhaustion amidst the turmoil of his conflict with Conan O'Brien. It was a clear signal that his grueling work schedule and the immense stress of his career were taking a serious toll, but he largely ignored it, continuing to push himself at a relentless pace. Things took a terrifying turn in late 2022, when in the span of just a few months, he was involved in two separate life-threatening accidents. In November 2022, while working on a vintage car in his garage, a fuel leak ignited, engulfing him in a gasoline-fueled fireball. He suffered severe second- and third-degree burns to his face, chest, and hands, and he spent 10 agonizing days in a specialized burn center undergoing painful skin graft surgeries. Incredibly, just 2 months later, in January 2023, while he was still recovering from his severe burns, he had another serious accident. While test riding a vintage motorcycle, he was knocked off the bike by an unmarked wire that had been stretched across a parking lot. The crash left him with a broken collarbone, 2 broken ribs, and 2 cracked kneecaps. As if this chain of misfortune was not enough, he suffered yet another serious fall in 2024, which resulted in a broken wrist and significant facial injuries. What was most remarkable, and perhaps most telling, about these incidents was Leno's response to them. After each horrific accident, despite being in immense pain and bearing visible scars and bruises, he would return to the comedy stage within a matter of weeks. He would stand before the audience, smile his famous smile, and turn his own physical suffering into material for his jokes, acting as if nothing truly serious had happened. This incredible resilience was a testament to his powerful work ethic, but it also revealed a deeper, more tragic truth. He was a man so accustomed to hiding his pain behind a mask of humor that he could not allow himself to show vulnerability, even when his body was literally falling apart. While he was bravely fighting through his own physical pain, the greatest and most heartbreaking tragedy of his life was quietly unfolding at home, targeting the last and most important person in his world. All the previous tragedies in Jay Leno's life, the childhood rejection, the career controversies, the loss of his entire family, and the physical destruction of his own body were devastating. But none could compare to the quiet, daily agony he now faces. The ordeal of watching his wife and soulmate, Mavis, slowly disappear before his very eyes. In early 2024, the world learned the devastating news when Jay filed a legal petition to become the conservator of his wife. Court documents revealed that Mavis, then 77 years old, had been diagnosed with advanced dementia. The disease had been progressing for years, leaving her with a major neurocognitive disorder that stripped her of her memory and her ability to understand her surroundings. The brilliant and fiercely independent woman, who had been his partner for 44 years, was now losing her grip on reality, sometimes failing to recognize her own husband or remember basic facts about her life. The disease was cruelly and methodically erasing the person she was, leaving him to care for the shell of the woman he loved. The true tragedy for Leno lies not just in his wife's illness, but in the profound and helpless pain of being a caregiver. Every day, he must watch the person he loves most in the world struggle with confusion and fear. He must patiently answer the same questions over and over again, and see a look of unfamiliarity in the eyes that once held a lifetime of shared memories. The legal act of filing for conservatorship was not an act of control, but a final, desperate act of love. He did it to establish a financial trust that would ensure Mavis would be cared for the rest of her life, especially in the event that he were to pass away before her. It was a heartbreaking admission that the partner who had stood by his side for decades was no longer capable of making her own decisions. The disease has forced Leno, a man who was always in motion, to finally stop. His world, once filled with television studios, comedy clubs, and his vast garage, has now shrunk to the confines of his home, where his life revolves around caring for his wife and cherishing the fleeting moments of clarity she might have. His last and greatest joy, the love and companionship of Mavis, is being slowly stolen from him in the most merciless way imaginable. Against this final enemy, his fame is useless, his wealth is powerless, and his humor offers no defense. He can only sit by her side, hold her hand, and bear witness to the slow, painful fading of the love of his life. This is his ultimate tragedy, a profound and quiet sorrow that no amount of laughter can ever hope to conceal. The life of Jay Leno is a relentless chronicle of tragedy. It began with the pain of a childhood spent feeling rejected and inadequate, and it evolved into a spectacular career that, despite its success, was forever marred by bitter conflict and accusations of betrayal. At the very moment he reached the summit of his profession, fate cruelly took away his mother, his father, and his only brother, leaving him profoundly alone. In his later years, his body was brutalized by a series of horrific accidents, and now, in the final act of his life, he must endure the ultimate heartbreak of watching his beloved wife, his last source of comfort and stability, be stolen from him by the slow, unforgiving erosion of dementia. The dazzling success of Jay Leno, with his immense fortune and legions of adoring fans, has proven to be nothing more than a fragile shield against a lifetime of sorrow. Fame, money, and laughter were ultimately powerless to prevent any of his life's greatest tragedies. They could not bring back his parents, they could not cure his brother's cancer, they could not heal his burned skin or mend his broken bones, and they certainly cannot stop the relentless advance of the disease that is erasing his wife's memory. Today, in his 70s, Jay Leno still walks onto stages and delivers his jokes with that familiar, iconic smile. But behind that smile now stands a tired and lonely man, quietly watching as the last precious piece of his world disintegrates day by day. The ultimate tragedy of Jay Leno is not that he has fallen, but that he is required to keep standing up, to keep performing, and to keep on smiling forever.